everybody, and welcome to another episode of Adventures with Andy. Recently I've been talking on videos about how when you're dyeing yarn, the larger the container that you have your dye bath in, the more room your yarn has to move around, the more likely you are to get a more consistent color. And that's what you want to do if you're wanting to try to dye a solid or a semi-solid. Whereas if you put it in a really small container and it's all crunched up and it doesn't have much room to move around, you're going to get much more of a tonal and potentially some resist points. So today we're gonna play around with that a little bit so you can see what I'm talking about. I have here a regular size mason jar and I have a really large mason jar. I also have 2 skeins of Dye Your Supplier 7525 Superwash Merino Nylon Fingering Weight yarn. One of these is going to go in our large mason jar. The other one's going to go in our little bitty mason jar, our regular size. Unless you think it won't fit, this is our yarn mop from one of our latest videos. And you can see this is a full skein of this yarn. For dye, we're going to be using some Kool-Aid Black Cherry and some Chef Master Neon Blue and Neon Green. And this is going to be a very random colorway. So to start, I'm just going to go ahead and put 1 skein in here, and you can see it's got tons of room. Now, gravity's going to work because gravity works. So it's still going to try to settle down into the jar, but it'll have more room to move. And the second one, told you that, is going to go in here. Okay, so we've got 1 skein in each jar here, and I'm going to put 1 packet of Kool-Aid Black Cherry in with each of these and add a few drops of each the blue and green of the Chef Masters. I could do this with just the Kool-Aid, but I thought, let's mix this up a little. It's kind of a spur of the moment thing that I came up with when I saw this giant mason jar at the store. This yarn is dry, which that can affect to some degree how the yarn takes. Wow, that smells so good, the Kool-Aid. It can affect to some degree how the yarn takes up the color, but not enough to make that big of a difference. And as you can see, because this one's got more room, I've got more room to spread out the color. The Kool-Aid has citric acid in it already, so I need you to move so I have more room. So that's going to serve as our acid component in this. I'm not going to worry about using any vinegar. Okay. It really does smell. Black cherry. It smells so good. Okay. Shake these up. Four in there. 1, 2, 3. 4 green in there. 1, 2, 3, 4 in there. 1, 2, 3, 4 the blue in there. And now we're going to add the water. And this is just a tub with some tap water in it. I've got some yarn just sitting here soaking that I'm getting ready to dye for another video. And I'm just going to put it directly in here. Okay, this is obviously gonna need some more, but I'm gonna switch over to this one for a minute before I run out of water in this tub. It really doesn't matter how much water I'm putting in here. It just matters more. Yes, I'm making a mess. Come on, you can soak down in there. And you can already see over here and over here, the dye is soaking down through the yarn. Okay, and I'm going to let this just sit here and keep soaking that in while I clean up some of this mess and continue with filling this. That was very heavy. And now we can go back to filling this one some more, because there's still, if you look here at the bottom, there's still dry yarn in here. And how well you can tell that I'm spilling dye all over myself. So yeah, there's still dry yarn in there, so we're gonna get back to this. And I know it probably seems like, oh wow, you put 8 drops of that food coloring in this mason jar, and that's a lot of food coloring along with the Kool-Aid in such a small container. But remember, this is the exact same amount of yarn as this one. The only thing that's different is the size of the container. I can keep adding water until it stops soaking down in there. So when I add water and it just stays there, then that's when I know it's full. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and stop with this one for now. I can still see some dry yarn in there. So it's possible that this level could go down some more. This water could work its way the rest of the way down so that I could add some more in. If it does, then I will add some more water in here because I want to make sure that all of the yarn gets wet. But if not, then we will just leave it as it is. But I'm going to go ahead and just put the lid on it for right now. Turn it around, take a look at some places. Yeah, I can see there's a spot there that I can't tell if it's dry or just didn't get any dye. And there's a spot right here that's definitely still dry, but hopefully dye bath will soak down into it. So we're just gonna let those sit for about 15-20 minutes and see if that works its way down, see if I need to add any more water to it. Obviously, this one does not need any more water in it. All right, our yarn has been sitting in its jars for the better part of a week now. We started dyeing this on Monday. It's Friday now. So I think we're going to go ahead and heat set this in the crock pot. As you can see from our large mason jar, its dye bath has completely exhausted. Our smaller mason jar, it's a little harder to tell. Okay, if you look really carefully, you can see just right here that we do have clear dye bath in here. It's very hard to see because there's not a lot of room, but its dye bath is also clear. We're gonna start with heat setting this one, just because that will give us water in the crock pot to use to steam set this jar. Obviously, this large jar will not fit in my crock pot. This lid doesn't actually unscrew. Fish out our yarn. And transfer it over. It smells like Kool-Aid, y'all. I know, it's because I'm using Kool-Aid, and it always smells like Kool-Aid when I'm using Kool-Aid. I'm just saying. All right, and now I can very carefully just transfer some water from the jar over to the crock pot. Put the lid on. And I am not going to worry about putting any vinegar in this because if you remember we use Kool-Aid. Kool-Aid has citric acid that will serve as our acid. And citric acid actually makes things acidic more easily than vinegar does. It takes less citric acid to make a dye bath acidic than it does vinegar. So not going to worry about putting any vinegar in here. Citric acid that comes in the Kool-Aid packet should be fine. Go ahead and turn the crock pot up to high and wait for this to get hot and then just let it sit for half hour or so. When it's done heat setting, then we'll come back and we will switch over to working on this one. All right, the water in our crock pot is hot and I let the yarn sit in here for about a little over 20 minutes. After it got hot, I'm going to go ahead and take it out now and just set it aside here in this bin, let it cool off. And we're going to start by putting this mason jar in here. Just this yarn still in the mason jar. But the water that's in the crock pot's hot, but I want to add a little bit more water to bring the water level up higher so it's in the areas where we've got all of that dye, because I want to make sure that it gets really hot in there. And I could have used just regular tap water for that, but since I had this water handy, might as well. And now, of course, that means the water is down to just warm instead of hot. So I've got to wait for the water to heat back up to hot again instead of just warm. And then I will let this mason jar yarn sit in that hot water for about 20-30 minutes. All right, so the water heated up and our yarn has been sitting in it for half an hour. I'm going to go ahead and turn the crock pot off. I debated taking the mason jar out of here for it to cool, maybe even to open it up and make sure that everything looks like it's set properly. However, it's really hot, so I'm not going to try to pick it up. Just going to let it sit here, cool in this bath. Probably just let it cool overnight. I like to do that a lot of times anyway. That way I know it's got plenty of time to cool and everything. And then I can wash it and see if there's any bleeding. If not, then I can let it dry and then up a swatch. If there is bleeding, we'll have to reset it again, and then I will come out here. You know that. But if not, if the next thing you see is finished skeins of yarn, then you know that this set worked just fine. Are you ready to see our finished yarn? Ta-da! Check out how different these two skeins look. Here, let's go ahead and open them up so we can see them a little bit better. Over here on our right, we have the skein that we dyed in our large, our oversized mason jar. And you can see that the colors spread out and they blended all throughout the skein. We got some browns, we've got some of the darker red from the black cherry, a few spots that have the green and the blue from where we put the Chef Master green and blue on there. But we also have, like over here, we have some yellow where that green broke, and you know, the brown is obviously from where the colors mix together. We've even got some over here. It looks like it's gray. So it's turned out really, really nice. I particularly love this spot right here where we've got this light patch of the yellowish brown, the darker brown here, and then this light green here. It reads verdigris copper to me. I mean, I know it's not an actual copper color, but that to me, I look at that and I'm like, that looks like verdigris copper. I love that. And the whole skein all throughout is just filled with those kinds of beautiful little surprises and pops of color. And then over here on the left, this is our yarn that we cram that whole skein down into the regular size mason jar. And you can see, unlike this one, we have a lot of this skein that's still undyed, that's completely white. And all of our colors are much more saturated than what we have over here. We've got some really deep saturated like ruby reds and dark blues, purples. We've got our greens going out through here. We do have some brown there, but the colors are overall just much more vibrant. And then when we work them into swatches, this is our large mason jar swatch. As I was knitting this, I just kept looking at it, and it reminds me of a hot fudge sundae with strawberry sauce. You know, when you're about halfway through it and the ice cream's all melting, it all starts to mix together. You've still got a little bit of the vanilla ice cream, but you know, the ice cream is starting to get mixed in with that chocolate, and you've got the strawberry sauce in there. And that's what this looks like to me. I look at this and I kept really craving a hot fudge sundae. And what's interesting is though, even though we have all those different colors and even some of like the greens and the yellows, they almost really get sort of lost in all of this. Like right here is where we have one of those blue sections, and then over here we have some of the yellow. But when you look at it overall, that's not really what you notice. You see the browns and you see the reds, and it works up just really pretty. By comparison, this is our swatch from our crammed jar yarn, and that is just gorgeous. I mean, I love this one too, but this is just so pretty. I love these bright pops of jewel tone colors. The predominant color is, of course, this sort of ruby russet red, but then you get these pops of the greens and the blues and the purple all throughout there on that background of white. And it reminds me of thermochromic fluid. That's the stuff that they use to make mood rings, or the stick-on thermometers that you can use for aquariums. That's what it reminds me of. It's so pretty. But what's just really amazing is to look at these two skeins and look at these two swatches and to realize these are the exact same yarn bases. And we use the exact same dye, the exact same amount of dye. Each one of these got 1 packet of Kool-Aid Black Cherry, 4 drops of the Chef Master Neon Blue, and 4 drops of the Chef Master Neon Green. They got the exact same dye. It was the exact same dye method. Both of these were done with the mason jar. The only difference is how much room the yarn had to move around in those jars. And this is the difference that you can get just by that one little change. We got 2 completely different skeins of yarn that work up into completely different ways and give you completely different feels. I mean, this is bright and jewel tone, and this one is just, it's more earthy and sedate. Just goes to show that you don't have to do a completely different dye method to get a completely different skein of yarn. Anyway, I hope you had fun watching me experiment with how changing the size of the dye bath and the container affects the way yarn takes up dye. I'd love to see what you do if you try playing with either of these methods yourself, and what you think about how that one change can affect things, or any other dye methods that you'd like me to play around with, how changing one element of it changes the result. As always, if you enjoyed the video, be sure to hit that like button. Make sure you subscribe if you aren't already so you never miss anything we do here. Have an absolutely fantastic day today, and I will see you on our next adventure. Bye!